The morning after I came home from the hospital, Clay showed up with his usual blend of charm and condescension. He brought flowers, store-bought still cold from the fridge section, and set them on the kitchen counter like they meant something. I was sitting at the dining table, my legs still shaky, but my mind sharper than it had been in weeks. "You're looking better," he said. I was worried there for a minute. I nodded, letting him talk. He pulled out a chair without asking already, slipping into that easy tone people use before saying something cruel. "I've already registered the house in my name," he said casually, like he was announcing the weather. "You should probably start looking for somewhere else. I figured it's easier for everyone if we don't drag this out." He smiled like it was for my benefit, like he was being generous. I didn't blink. I didn't ask questions. I reached for the folder in my lap, closed it slowly, and placed it beside my tea. Inside were the notarized documents I'd filed the day before: cancellation of power of attorney, revocation of deed transfer, full confirmation from the county clerk. He didn't know I'd already undone everything. He was too late. Too arrogant to notice the locks had been changed, too confident to check if the paperwork had been processed. He kissed my cheek before leaving. I didn't return the gesture. That night, I sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the wind shift through the trees. This house had known every version of me: wife, mother, widow. It had stood through ice storms, birthday parties, and now, betrayal. I looked at the porch light flickering slightly and made a note to replace the bulb in the morning. Some things I could still fix on my own. Others required witnesses. I turned the porch light off before going inside, and by the time I passed through the living room, I noticed something was missing. A chair. One of the guest chairs. The chair was gone. Not just moved to another room, gone. It had been part of a set oak legs with hand-stitched cushions I'd done myself back when my hands were steadier. I scanned the room twice, then noticed the side table missing too. The one with the hairline crack I kept hidden under a coaster. I called Clay. I kept my voice level. "Did you move furniture?" He didn't pause. "Yeah. I had the guys take a couple pieces to storage, making space. For staging. We've got a walkthrough next week. Relax. It's just early prep. Nothing's final until the paperwork clears." I said nothing. Not because I agreed, but because I was already opening the drawer by the hall closet. Inside, I felt the cool jingle of new keys, the ones I'd made after canceling the transfer. Clay talked like the house was halfway gone, like I was the guest here. But the title still had my name. The walls still held my breath. I hung up and walked to the back window. The garden looked as it always did, a little wild but proud, a slice of stubbornness tucked into the earth. I hadn't touched it since the surgery, but it hadn't let go of me. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a number I hadn't used in years. Lenore, the attorney, who once helped me with my husband's will. She was also Jan's younger sister. Jan still lived next door and always left extra peaches on my porch in July. Lenore picked up after 2 rings. "Ms. Maris," she said. "It's been a while." "It has," I said. "And it looks like I'll need your help again." We arranged to meet the next afternoon. I spent the rest of the day walking through my house like a stranger might. I opened drawers, counted frames, measured silence. The paperwork wasn't cleared, Clay had said. He was right. But he wouldn't be the one clearing it. And when I woke the next morning, I had a name to search at the county recorder's office. The clerk at the county recorder's office had tired eyes and a practiced tone. "Yes, we received the deed transfer submission," she said, tapping keys. "Submitted last Thursday." She paused. "But it's incomplete. The accompanying power of attorney was outdated by 48 hours. I nodded, like it was a casual detail, not the thread that kept my home from being handed away. Lenore sat beside me. Her heels neatly crossed her presence, calm, but unmistakably alert. She slid a packet of papers across the desk. "Here's the revocation," she said, "filed this morning, And here's the cancellation of all previous authorizations. The clerk skimmed the forms, gave a slow nod, and said, "This will block any further processing." That's all I needed. We left without fanfare. Lenore didn't ask why my own son would do this. I think she already knew, or maybe she understood, that when someone's trying to steal the roof over your head, you don't start by explaining family. Back home, I opened my laptop and went through every bank login, every digital file. I reset passwords, removed his name from emergency contacts, transferred utilities solely to my name. I wasn't just cleaning up, I was closing the gates. Around 9 p.m., my phone lit up. A text from Clay. "Need you out before end of month. Have someone interested already?" I stared at it for a long time, then typed back, "We'll discuss it in person." I didn't send what I wanted to. I didn't say the sale was blocked, that the deed still carried my signature and mine alone. I didn't tell him I knew about the missing furniture or the listing. Instead, I opened my drawer and pulled out the notebook I kept for upholstery orders back when I still ran the shop. I flipped past fabric swatches and thread calculations. On a fresh page, I wrote the date at the top. Then I began. Text from Clay. Copy of submitted revocation, property access changes. By morning, I had printed screenshots, time-stamped emails, and a full document log, and a real estate link that made my heart stop. I typed my address into the search bar, half hoping it would turn up nothing, but there it was. A glossy online listing with 22 photos, clear, well-lit, professionally staged. I clicked through each one. My kitchen stripped of magnets and the dish towel I always hung from the stove. The living room where the quilt was folded too neatly to be mine. The guest bedroom, its walls bare. The back porch, swing hours. My late husband and I built it one summer when we couldn't afford a vacation. We stained it with brushes from the dollar store. It was all there. Stolen, staged, and repackaged. The listing read like a parody, spacious 3-bedroom with charming character. Meticulously maintained. Seller motivated. I wasn't the seller, and nothing about what Clay had done was meticulous. I scrolled to the bottom. The agent's name wasn't familiar, but I copied it anyway, along with the brokerage, the listing ID, and every timestamp I could find. Then I went to the printer-loaded paper and printed each page, photos included. I didn't even flinch when the ink ran low. I just replaced the cartridge and kept going. When I was done, I scanned it all back in, compiled it into a single PDF, and emailed it to Lenore. Subject line, unauthorized sale. Prepare to block. She replied 6 minutes later. Understood. I'll handle it. I sat back and looked around the real version of the home they tried to sell. The quilt was still draped over the back of the couch. The kitchen still smelled faintly of lemon and fabric softener. None of the pictures had caught that. It wasn't just a house. It was a living space, flawed and familiar. And suddenly, I knew Clay hadn't just tried to steal something physical. He had tried to erase me. But I was still here. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The first thing I heard was tires on gravel. When I looked through the window, there were cars pulling up in front of my house. I walked through the house after dark, barefoot, letting the wood cool beneath my soles. The buyers hadn't knocked, just stood out front with puzzled looks. Maps on their phones peering up at the windows like I was already gone. I didn't turn on the porch light. I didn't need to. Instead, I made my way through each room, slow and steady fingers trailing along surfaces I knew by touch. The low edge of the kitchen counter where I once leaned with a hot cup after long shifts. The linen closet door that stuck slightly unless you pulled it left first. Inside, the faint shadow of an old stain lingered near the baseboard. I remembered the night Clay had the fever. I'd sat on the floor with a bowl of water scrubbing until the heat in his body broke. Near the front door, the nail still jutted slightly crooked from the weight of his backpack all those years. He used to toss it off before he even said hello. Now he wanted the square footage, the profit. He saw resale value. I saw my life. This wasn't just where I lived, it was where I grew into myself again, after burying my husband, where I kept going, even when the money was thin and my hands cramped from sewing long past midnight. Every chair still held the imprint of something I'd built or repaired or refused to replace. I paused in front of the fireplace where the mantel still bore a small dent from when Clay dropped his toy truck. He was 4. Cried like it was the end of the world. I'd told him some scars stayed that it wasn't always a bad thing. I sat in my armchair, the one they'd moved for, staging, and then quietly returned. I ran my palm across the armrest, feeling the stitching under the fabric. There was no photo that could show what this house meant. No price tag that could measure it. And I knew when the next knock came, I wouldn't be the one answering. The first car rolled in just after 9. A gray SUV with tinted windows. The second arrived minutes later, a couple in pressed jeans and matching sunglasses. Then came another, and another. All of them slowed as they reached the driveway, unsure whether to park or keep circling. I sat in the armchair by the front window, a mug of lukewarm tea in my hand. I didn't move. Didn't flinch. I waited. At 9:22, the knock came. Sharp practiced. A woman's voice followed, cheerful but rehearsed. Mrs. Maris, we're just here for the open house. I opened the door halfway and stepped out with the papers in my hand. I'm afraid you've been misinformed, I said, holding the document out without blinking. This property is not for sale. I am still the legal owner. Any attempt to enter will be treated as trespassing. The agent blinked, caught off guard. She looked down at the notice, reading fast, her mouth parting slightly as the truth settled. She stepped back. This wasn't what I was told. I imagine it wasn't. She didn't argue. She turned and walked back toward the driveway phone already in hand. The other buyers, confused and fidgeting, began returning to their cars. I closed the door and walked into the kitchen, topped off my tea with a fresh splash of hot water. Then I walked to the back porch and watered the potted plants one by one. Clay's voice would be hitting her phone by now, tight and defensive. By noon, the foot traffic had stopped completely. By 5, the listing was gone. No calls came to me, no apology, no explanations, just silence. I didn't need the noise. I had my garden, my list, my name still printed on the deed. And tomorrow I would start the second phase, the part he'd never see coming. He showed up just after sunset. No warning. No flowers this time. Just his car idling at the curb while he stood on the porch, fists in his jacket pockets. I didn't move right away. Let him knock twice before I opened the door. There was no smile. You embarrassed me, he said. That sale was important. His voice had that sharp edge again, like I was the problem. Like I'd broken something he built. Was it more important than me? I asked, keeping my tone steady. He looked away just for a second. Just long enough to answer without words. You're making this harder than it has to be, he muttered. You don't even use half the house anymore. It's too much for you. I'm trying to make it easier. Easier for who I asked, still not moving from the threshold. I thought we could both win, he said. You get a condo, something manageable. I take care of the rest. He meant he takes the house, the money, the power. He decides what I need, what I'm worth. That's fine, I said. Then I'll downsize when I'm ready, on my terms. He sighed, frustrated. You're being stubborn. Maybe I said. Or maybe I'm just not done being the owner of my own life. We stood in silence. He was waiting for something and opening a soft spot. But there weren't any left. I didn't invite him in. After a few seconds, he gave a tight nod and walked back to his car. The engine roared louder than usual as he pulled away. I stood at the door a while longer, letting the quiet settle again. Inside the house, exhaled with me. Still mine. And the next morning, the first envelope was sealed and addressed to his office. 2 weeks passed without Clay showing up at my door again. He sent a handful of messages, short-clipped, each one circling the same theme: updates, timelines, questions about my plans. I answered none of them. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I had already chosen how to say it. On a quiet Thursday morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a pen in my hand and 2 envelopes beside me. The air felt still, the kind of stillness that comes before a shift. I read the documents one more time, though I didn't need to. I could have recited every line. The first letter was addressed to Clay. A formal notice prepared with Lenore's guidance sent by certified mail. It stated that he no longer had access to any financial accounts documents or decision-making authority tied to me or my home. Every previous authorization had been revoked. Every attempt at gaining control had been noted. No emotion, no accusations, just facts. The kind that leave no room for argument. The second letter went to the real estate agent, the one who had smiled her way through the open house before realizing she'd been sold a lie. It informed her that the listing she'd posted was unauthorized and that any further involvement without my written consent would be treated as participation in attempted property fraud. That one was even shorter, cleaner, harder to wiggle around. I signed both letters without hesitation. My hand didn't shake. Some legacies are passed down freely. Others have to be protected by someone who remembers every overdue bill she scraped together money to pay, every holiday she spent alone, every shift she took, so her son wouldn't go without. Clay had forgotten those things. I hadn't. By noon, the envelopes were stamped and dropped into the blue mailbox on the corner. I watched them disappear through the slot, 2 slips of paper carrying the weight of 30 years. When I walked back up the driveway, the phone was already ringing. I didn't answer. I let it echo through the house while I stepped inside and began preparing the next set of documents. Spring took its time that year. The trees hesitated before blooming. The air still carried the bite of winter most mornings. I didn't mind. The slowness gave me room to breathe. One afternoon, I climbed the stepladder myself and replaced the porch light. Clay always used to do it back when he was still the kind of son who checked in after dinner. But my hands were still steady, and I wanted to do it on my own. By the time I came down, Lenore was pulling into the drive. She had a to-go tray with 2 coffees and a knowing look. "He called again," she said, handing me the drink. "Twice today." Sounded panicked. I didn't ask what he said. I didn't need to. He says he just wanted to help, that it was all misunderstood. I stirred my coffee slowly, letting the words settle. I did help him, I said. His whole life. I just won't help him erase me. We sat together on the porch, letting the breeze move around us. For once, I didn't feel like I had to explain anything. Lenore had been there through enough. She'd seen how quickly people start rewriting history when there's money involved, or a house, or pride. The phone didn't ring that day, not once. And I didn't check for messages. Inside, everything was just where I wanted it. No missing furniture. No boxed-up corners of my life. I had unpacked what mattered and left the rest outside my door, figuratively and otherwise. It didn't matter that the deed still bore my name. What mattered was that I finally believed I had the right to keep it that way. Not out of fear or guilt or some worn-out duty to family, but because I wanted to. The sun shifted, casting the porch in a long stretch of light. Lenore stood to leave. "You're steady," she said, squeezing my shoulder. "I hope he figures that out." I nodded, and as her car pulled away, I glanced back at the front window. The armchair was there exactly where I'd placed it. There's a single chair by the window now. not for visitors, not for negotiation. It's the chair I made with my own hands when I was 23, the one I brought home from my first workshop before the business even had a sign. I reupholstered it twice over the years, once after Clay spilled grape juice on it during a birthday party, and once again after my husband passed, just to keep my hands busy. That chair never left the house. Not when we moved rooms, not when furniture came and went, and certainly not when Clay tried to sell the walls around it. It sits in a patch of sunlight most mornings. I sit there too sometimes with coffee, sometimes with nothing but silence. The mail arrives. The days pass. My name remains on the deed. There are no more updates from Clay. No more texts about walkthroughs, no calls about listings. After the notice went through and the agent stepped back, he stopped pretending it was about helping. He just disappeared into the quiet I gave him. I didn't chase that silence. I let it settle. I started placing things where I wanted them, not based on where they used to be or who might visit or what made the house look tidy, just for me. The quilt stays draped. The porch swing is oiled again, and the crooked nail by the front door still holds a wind chime Lenore gifted me last week. I don't think about the fight anymore. Not the legal parts, not the betrayal. I think about how the floors creak the same way they always have, how the air smells after rain, how it feels to choose what stays. This house never truly protected me. It was just wood and roof and stone. I was the one who protected it. I kept it standing. I made it a home. And now, for the first time in a long while, I sit in the chair by the window without wondering who might come for it.